I used to think starting over was a geography problem. Find a smaller town. Find colder water. Let the tide discipline your thoughts until the old life sounds like the tail end of a song you didn't like anyway. My divorce made me evangelical about distance. If I could get far enough from the city where I'd spent 10 years avoiding honest conversations with a woman who deserved them, maybe the version of me that specialized in not saying things would forget the route. That's how I ended up in a northern village people on maps would call coastal, and the locals called where the wind keeps its knives. The village has a name that reads like a dare, Northbridge Cove. It's a handful of houses pulled tight around a harbor shaped like a bitten coin. The street that pretends to be Maine turns into a path the minute it sees the sea. It smells like rope toughened with salt and coffee made by hands that have learned to be gentle after spending all day with hooks. When I arrived in late September, the sky had the color of metal that regrets an old fight. I rented a weathered cottage that had convinced Ivy it was dependable. The listing said 2 bedrooms, writer's study, deck, and a view of the water. Sufficient to remind the lonely what they came for. The agent, a woman named Mara, who wore a ring like a comma, handed me keys and a smile designed to survive other people's stories. He's temperamental, she said, which is what people say when they want to admit a thing without signing a confession. A caretaker comes by Thursdays and... She hesitated, then put the paperwork down like it had feelings. If you find notes tucked places, it's a quirk of the house. Previous owner was fond of postcards. Don't worry about returning anything. She wrote a number on a torn envelope. Call if the wind starts bringing shingles. It does that. The cottage's front steps made a sound like old people agreeing with each other. Inside was clean without being new, which is a way of saying it remembered humans. Pine floors soft as lemons, shelves full of paperback mysteries with titles that worry about storms. In the kitchen, a ceramic mug with a chip on its lip sat upside down beside a note. Future tenant. If you're reading this, you're braver than I was this morning. There's stew in the freezer and tape cassettes in the drawer left of the stove. The deck is safe if you trust it. The gull with 1 foot answers to church. Don't let her name fool you. L. I took the mug down and ran my thumb over the chip. I told myself this was coastal flavor, a landlady with a sense of dramaturgy. But the drawer left of the stove held a slim, dusty stack of cassettes labeled in black marker. For you 1, for you 2, for you 3, and so on, up to 9. Beside them, a portable tape player old enough to have opinions about batteries. There was also a single unlabeled cassette with a cracked case that had been repaired with tape and a kind of faith. I didn't press play that first night. I put the cassettes back the way you put bones back where you found them when you're not ready to learn what animal they belong to. I built a fire that did its job politely. I ate noodles standing up because chairs are for people with plans. I tried not to need the internet and then used it anyway to let my ex know I'd arrived. We had agreed to be kind in the way people agree to not set fires in public. She texted back a thumbs up in a line I didn't deserve. I hope the air gives you the feeling you're after. The feeling I was after had no name I could mention without sounding like a man in a bookstore looking for redemption in aisle 5. Morning made its case with a slanted light that made the harbor look like glass being cut. The gull with 1 foot sat on the deck railing and performed indifference like it had rehearsal that afternoon. I made coffee in the chipped mug because superstition and walked down to the water with it like other men walk their dogs. The tide was low enough to reveal the wooden ribs of an old dock that thought it had not been caught. The houses along the curve of the cove looked like shoulders in sweaters. At noon, I tried the tape player. It whirred in that way machines do when they prefer to be respected. The first cassette clicked, and the hiss arrived my childhood in a sound. Then a man's voice, 20 years younger than mine, and also mine if I had grown up inside a refrigerator repair shop. Calm, cautious, with a crackle at the edges. Future tenant, the voice said. Welcome. I don't know if you believe in leaving useful ghosts, so I'm trying to be one. My name doesn't matter yet. You can have it later if it helps. I think telling you too much is a way of making you less brave. You rented this place because you think sea air cures cowardice. It does not. It gives it stamina. This tape is the kind of apology I keep rehearsing out loud so I don't have to deliver it in person. I'm sorry in advance. Press stop if you like your illusions. Press play if you want to pick up a piece I left for you without meaning to. I pressed stop, left the player on the counter, walked out to the deck and pretended the sun wasn't interrogating me. Church the gull hopped sideways like a priest with a deadline. When I pressed play again, the hissing had learned my attention. My rules, the voice went on. 1. Don't swim at night. 2. If you go to the breakwater after 10, turn left, not right. The right looks easier. It is. That's why it's worse. 3. If a woman named Nia asks you whether you're staying long, say, long enough to hear Winter's version. You don't know what that means yet. 4. When you find the half-finished letter in the second bedroom, don't throw it away, even if you think you hate me. Nanum, the tape clicked and went silent, as if the man had looked up and the machine forgot its purpose. I rewound out of reflex and heard the same words again. My stomach doing that little sink it does when the present suddenly resembles something you haven't done yet. That afternoon, I met Nia. I wasn't trying to. I walked the path along the harbor to the only place that decided to be social, a cafe attached to a bait shop where the chalkboard says, coffee, fish, and other honesties. The woman behind the counter wore a sweater with holes in the sleeves she pretended not to notice. Her hair belonged to its own wind. When I asked for coffee, she said, we do it strong enough to wake choices. I paid and tried to leave before anyone decided to care. You're in the Hargreaves place, she said to my back, and I turned because my mother raised me within shouting distance of manners. The cottage with the ivy, I said. It's mine for a month. Long, she asked. This is the part of the story where I should have said her name isn't Nia, because that would make a tidy little argument against curses, predictable but reassuring. It was Nia. The name fitted her face like it had been carved there when she was 12. Long enough, I said, because I had learned my line from a ghost on a tape. She nodded in the way locals nod when they're granting you a provisional map. You'll have to forgive the wind, she said. She's dramatic. The power sulks. The gulls swear. The tourists turn into weather reports and then leave. I'm not a tourist, I said, too fast to be true. Everyone is, she said, until they learn where to stand. She had a ring mark on her finger where a ring had decided to move out. When she handed me the coffee, her sleeve slipped and revealed a scar that looked like a line a child would choose to draw a cliff. I thought about telling her I was recently divorced and very good at quiet. I thought about apologizing to a stranger for a marriage she had not attended. I said thank you, like I was paying for a confession. On the way back to the cottage, I found the second bedroom. It hadn't been hiding. It just preferred doors to be shy. The bed was made in a way that respects the idea of corners. On the small desk under the window, a half-finished letter waited with the sort of patience only paper learns. The handwriting was the same confident slant from the label on the mug's first note. I didn't read it. I folded it exactly once and put it beside the cassettes like you lay a tool where you plan to learn to use it later. I put in tape 2. Future tenant, the man said. You've met Nia by now if you're unlucky in the way I was lucky. She'll be wearing a sweater that was faithful until it couldn't be. You'll want to protect what's run in you that feels like a window. Don't. She doesn't need a savior. She needs a person who can stand at a window and say, that's east, without needing to be clapped for. He coughed, the way men do when they wish their truth had arrived with a better posture. There's a place at the end of the breakwater where sensible people turn back. You'll go past it. We all do when we're practicing being exceptions. When you do, watch your feet. The rocks look like answers. They're just sharp. I snapped the tape off because prophecy and condescension sound the same in the wrong mood. I took a walk at sunset to refuse the idea that a stranger in my kitchen could choreograph my body. The breakwater reached toward the horizon like it believed in intimacy. The wind did that thing the wind does here where it tastes like the ghosts of winter and the cheap beer of summer. I turned left at the end, out of a joke on myself. The walking felt like keeping a contract with a version of me who hadn't yet disappointed me. I went home and fell asleep like the house had poured me a drink. On Thursday, the caretaker arrived, a woman named Isa, with a soldered wedding band and a toolbox that had everything important and none of the extras. She had the kind of competence that piloted the room. Everything working, she said, in a tone that invited truth. The heat's a negotiation, I said. Tell it you know it's family, she said, and went straight to the basement to say it for me. When she came back, she had a look like she listened to a dull apology and accepted it for the sake of the children. On her way out, she paused by the tapes. You started them? She said, not asking. A little, I said. Seems like a considerate haunting. It's a man who thought if he labeled his fear advice, it would cause less trouble, she said. It's also useful. People rarely choose to be that for strangers unless they failed to be it for someone else. What happened to him? I asked. She adjusted the brim of a cap that was older than the bait shop. He moved, she said, which is one of our local words for the same thing as vanished, but with less paperwork. She left the door with a competence I envied. I pressed play on tape 3 like a person checking whether blood was still blood. I grew up 2 towns inland, the voice said. We came to Northbridge on Sundays because my mother believed in the health of watching men work. The first time I told the truth in a place that could have ruined me was at the end of the breakwater in November. The wind made it look brave. It wasn't. It was timing. If you came here to not be who you were in the city, you'll find yourself telling the same lies prettier. Nia does not deserve to be your recovery. If you tell her that, she will like you for a week and then turn into a clock. That night I dreamed the stove clock blinked 2:17 in Morse code. Church thumped the roof like a judge with a small gavel. I woke up to rain that announced itself as a new regime. The roof sang its sheet metal opera. The power went out with the drama of a teenager. I made tea on the gas burners like a pioneer who owns a phone. When the storm acted like it was interested in hearing human voices, I put on my coat and walked to the cafe because the alternative was learning what I sounded like on tape. Nice night for a shipwreck, Nia said, pushing hair behind her ear with the practiced motion women acquire in towns that behave like enemies of hats. She poured burnt coffee like it was a sacrament. There were 2 other men in the room, a dumbbell-shaped fisherman and an old man who looked like a weather report. They watched me without inserting themselves into my plot. I felt almost healthy. I told Nia I liked the way the chalkboard admitted the truth. She said she was the one who wrote Other Honesties. We used to put eggs there, she said. Then the hens became moody, and honesty is safer. We were starting to say the small human things that accumulate into a feeling when a woman came in, shaking rain off her coat like a dog negotiating a treaty. She had a face like something you keep on a shelf for luck. She looked at me not at all, then turned to Nia and said, "He's here again." Nia didn't turn her head. "Who?" Nia said, arranging mugs in a line that preferred intention. "The one from the cottage," the woman said, "with the tapes." "The tapes," Nia said, like they were the weather. She introduced herself as Sarah friend, neighbor, nurse, witness. "We have a theory," she said to me. "Every few years, a man arrives needing to be a better person, and the house tries to make him into one using props. You seem literate enough to survive." "How do the others fare?" I asked. "They either leave a note or they don't," she said. "It's the same outcome spoken with different manners." I went home because dignity has a shelf life. I pressed play on tape 4 like a person trying to prove a doctor wrong. "Stop checking coincidences for fingerprints," the voice said. "They're not evidence, they're scaffolding. You met Sarah. She's kinder than her name. She will tell you Nia is not the river, and she isn't. Don't treat her like a baptism. You will want to. The house is good at staging baptisms with salt water and wind in someone's honest jaw." The tape sighed. "There's a ledger in the 2nd bedroom closet. It isn't mine. It belongs to the house. Read it, then put it back. You're not the first future tenant. Try to be the last who makes it somebody else's job to turn your voice into a warning." The ledger hid behind a few folded blankets like it was ashamed to be that obvious. It was a book of names and dates that made clerks and ghosts happy. The handwriting shifted decade by decade, but the pattern did not. 3 or 4 years between arrivals. Always September or October. Always a month. Always a note. Left early. Brought a dog. Mended fence. Met in N. Beside one entry. 2007, someone had written, "Returned in December with a letter finally worth keeping." Another 1996, swam at night, church watched, survived, left tape, 7. There are good times to pretend you don't believe in plots. This wasn't one. I took tape 5 outside because if I listened inside, the house would think it had me. Nia will ask you to help fix the gutter on her mother's place, the voice said, in the tone of a weather enthusiast describing a storm's personality. Say yes if you can say nothing after. If not, say no. She divides reluctance and silence into separate sins, and she's right. If you kiss her on the porch of the blue house, her neighbor will tell her ex she kissed a man who wears city shoes. Then it will be a small town again, and you will owe everyone a speech. The next afternoon, Nia asked if I knew ladders. I nodded like a liar. The gutter had pulled free of the eaves like a patient deciding he was done being treated. Her mother wore an expression I recognized from 1,000 mothers. Wary gratitude mixed with skepticism of men with tools. We fixed the gutter because catastrophe prefers to be forestalled when it involves water. When we were done, Nia said thank you in a voice that had weather in it. On the porch, while the aluminum sighed about the weight of rain, she stood close enough to count my cowardice. I did not kiss her. I'm trying to make different choices, I said, and it was both true and sanctimonious. She smiled like she'd heard better sermons delivered by gulls. Try making them out loud, she said, to other people. She tapped the side of my head with one finger. The ones in there don't make you braver. They just make you tired. We didn't kiss. Her neighbor still told her ex I had come to ruin the decent order of things with my outsized city shoes. That night a truck I didn't recognize slowed in front of the cottage long enough to tell me I wasn't special. Tape 6 was waiting on the counter. I hadn't left it on. This is the part, the voice said, where the house will make you decide whether you like being watched. You do. It reminds you of childhood and the illusion of supervision. That's part of why your last marriage died. You were better at being seen than at seeing. I'm sorry. I'm saying this to myself. I'm saying this to you. I am both. Sometimes the body knows before the brain signs paperwork. I paused the tape. I stood very still. I listened to the fridge's old man breathing, to the window's teeth, to the gull's one-footed sermon. I felt the sentence land and then start to walk around like it had paid rent. The letter in the second bedroom had to be read now because that's how narratives behave when you feed them. It began. N. It's late and I'm writing because speaking is a currency I keep hoarding. I am going to leave before dawn in the direction that feels like apology. It isn't. It's cowardice with a good coat. I'm sorry. For the sympathy I used like an inheritance. For the week where I thought telling you everything would make me honest without changing anything about what I'm capable of. For kissing you on the wrong porch in somebody else's story. I hope the wind treats your hair kindly. L. It wasn't addressed to Nia exactly. There was no last name. It was the kind of letter left by men who like performing crisis management. It made me tired in the way my own voice makes me tired when I pretend it's a solution. Whoever L was, he had the same handwriting as the cassette labels. Whoever he was, he moved like me when I'm trying to make an exit look like a decision. Whoever he was me. Just obvious. The house wasn't haunted by a stranger. It was haunted by a version of me who had already run this route. Tapes as breadcrumbs. Notes as signage. The ledger as an insult that looked like an inventory. I tried to prove myself wrong by doing something normal. I asked Issa about the gutter, about the roof, about the naming of gulls, about the healthiest brand of loneliness. She shrugged like a woman who's learned to outlive most men's confessions. You left the porch light on last night, she said. That helps. Houses forgive a lot when you remind them you plan to return. Did Elle come back in December with a letter worth keeping? I asked. She looked at me like I'd presented a case file with all the names redacted. He did, she said. It was short. It said, I am not using you as my recovery anymore. It was left where we keep the maps. The maps lived in a drawer that stuck like it resented being asked for the truth. Under a nautical chart of the bay, and a tourist map drawn by a person who believed in whales, there it was, a single sheet, folded with ceremony. The handwriting was mine on a careful day. The words were a strange man's. I was good at lighting up in other people's kitchens, so I didn't have to be brave in my own. I won't do it again to you, N. I won't do it again to anyone. If the next tenant is me, tell him to leave earlier or stay longer, but don't let him perform honesty for applause. L. I walked down to the dock to find a horizon that could handle me. The wind pared everything down to nouns. I thought about why I'd really come here. Not to write, not to heal, to avoid the sound of the truth in the city, which is efficient and cruel. To practice being a man whose decisions have shapes other people recognize. To see if boredom and salt could alchemize into character. Tape 7 waited like a dare. I pressed play without pretending I would resist it. "Future tenant," the voice said. "By now you've read the letter. You've probably met the ex with his hurt parked in a truck. You've learned the stove's second burner is gentle as long as you don't lie. You will be asked to go out on the breakwater in 2 nights. Sarah will tell you not to. Listen to her. She has lost a person to water and a person to the kind of honesty that makes everyone poor. If you go anyway, and you will, you'll want to find the clam ring. It's not there. You're looking for a symbol. There aren't any. There's only the work of getting through a month without turning your life into somebody's documentary." I went out 2 nights later because prophecy exists to be tested. The breakwater was slick, as if the town had sent someone to make it more caring by making it more dangerous. Halfway down, Nia appeared from a doorway in the wrecked wall like a person testing a stage. "You can't help yourself," she said, not accusing. Concern and affection and something like embarrassment lived in her voice as roommates who'd learned to share rent. "I wanted to see it at high tide," I said, which is one of 100 lines men say when they want to be noble about what is actually compulsion. "There's nothing to see," she said, which is the point of a lot of the things we ruin ourselves with. We stood with our shoulders near. The wind tried to negotiate us farther apart. We remained. "I wasn't going to kiss you," I said. "I believe you," she said. "But I also believe you came here to find out whether you're the kind of man who restrains himself, because for once the restraint isn't an act." "And what would that make me?" I asked. "A beginner," she said. We walked back. On the porch of the blue house, her ex sat on the top step with the posture of a man who thinks leaning can make him taller. He looked at me like I had imported sins that were cheaper locally. "You fixing gutters for free now?" he said to Nia, which is how men in small towns ask women whether they are eating. She didn't answer. He watched me for a long beat, then stood up like a chair being moved in a ceremony. "Careful with our ghosts," he said to me, and left. Tape 8 was waiting by the door like a dog. The label had a scratch across the 8 that turned it into Infinity's weird cousin. I wanted to hurl it into the harbor and then file a noise complaint against my own habits. I pressed play. "I wrote a lot of these after I did something I wanted to contain," the voice said. "I'm trying to get ahead of myself with this one. You're thinking about leaving in the morning, about the city being a place where failure is less visible and therefore more comfortable. If you do that, you'll call the month clarifying and tell people you needed to reset. You will sound healthy. You will be performing good mental health the way you perform good marriage. Stay or leave, but choose it in a way that allows someone else to interrupt without it collapsing. And write the letter, the good one, not the apology that leaves you looking like a scholar of regret. The letter that gives the next version of you less work. Put it under the maps." He stopped talking, then, "My name is Liam," he said. "It isn't a magic word, but calling something by its name is a way of poking God and saying, we're working with real things now. Later, if you need it, my last initial is Carr. Liam Carr. You can call me coward. I've earned it. You can also call me someone who tried hard at the wrong things and is learning to try at the right ones." I lay awake that night while the house tried to sternly explain itself to the wind. I thought about saying Liam aloud until it wore out and turned into humor. I thought about not saying it at all, because not naming is how I keep distance. I asked myself the dumb, brave question that people who want to be different ask themselves when the audience is off duty. What am I going to do in the morning that I don't have to write down to make real? In the morning, Sarah knocked on the door and handed me a bowl of chowder that deserves its own religion. "I made this for someone," she said, "who has not admitted he needs it." She looked at my face like a paramedic. "That person is you." "Am I that see-through?" I asked. "You're the new guy with the tapes and the nice shoes," she said. "We get one every few years. I like you better than most. You drink coffee like it's a promise you intend to keep." I ate the chowder and felt my bones remember why houses exist. I wrote the letter, not the apology, the useful one. I said, I stay long enough to be bored and you should too. Boredom is where you discover you weren't brave. You were busy. If you meet Nia, remember she has already survived someone else's trajectory. She isn't your study guide. If you meet Sarah, let her not save you. If you need to leave, don't make it a performance. It'll be uglier than it needs to be. If you stay, repair something boring and don't ask for credit. Edel. I put it under the maps. I didn't write my last name. Then I took the unlabeled tape, the one with the cracked case, and put it in the player because that's what myths are for. The hiss was different, closer, less patient. Then a voice I recognized in the way you recognize your shadow when it stands in a doorway with the light behind it. Jonah, the voice said. My name, not future tenant. My actual name. If you're here, it means the part of you that believes in maps needs editing. You'll be tempted to treat this whole thing as an exercise in cleverness. Please don't. You left a marriage by degrees. Don't leave this place the same way. Either pack or don't. But if you stay another week, I think you'll learn how to have a conversation with a person who isn't your idea of safety. P.S. The gull will be insulted if you rename her. I didn't stand up for a while because if I did, everything would matter faster. It wasn't my voice. It was close. It had a similar way of disrespecting consonants when tired. It used the same dumb jokes I've always leaned on when the room catches me being sincere. It was like listening to a brother someone forgot to raise with me. The next days turned into a small experiment. What if I make decisions that have no audience in mind? I helped Issa replace a board on the deck because the deck had asked for it with a groan anyone can translate. I returned Sarah's bowl and said her chowder is a domestic truce. She laughed and told me to stop using words to be good at people. I told Nia if she needed anything repaired and the requirement was silence, I had 2 hands and no more tapes queued up. She squinted at me like she could smell the tape on my fingers. Okay, she said, fix the hinge on the back door and keep your sentences to a minimum. At the end of the month, I had the shape of something that might be a life if I stopped sanding its edges. I had also the weight of a decision heavier than winter. Leave now with a story that can be told over beer and dies easily in the face of grocery lists, or stay long enough to fail in a way that has to be repaired in front of other people. On my last Thursday, Issa came in with her competent toolbox and said, Church has started bullying the crows again, like it was weather worth noting. She went to the basement, came back with dust on her knuckles and said, There's one more tape. She handed it to me like it might be a small animal. The label said, For us 9. You knew about this one? I asked. I hid it for the version of you that earned it, she said. Don't prove me wrong. I sat on the floor like a person at the end of a hallway who has to decide whether to knock. Press play. Us, the voice said. I'm using that because if the house does its job, we'll agree we're not a chain of accidents. We're a person trying to stop outsourcing courage. I'm leaving this because I didn't. I ran. Then I came back in December with an honest letter and a better coat. You can save yourself the coat. Write the letter. Say the thing to the face in the room. Do not turn Nia into a course you passed. Do not turn Sarah into a chapter you skim when you need someone to be grateful. Do not turn Issa into a parable about competence. Say thank you. Mean it. Fix the hinge and ruin no one. If you're me, put your last name on something that isn't a bill. If you're not me, forgive me for turning the cottage into a complicated post office. The tape clicked, hissed, then a quieter voice, as if he'd leaned toward the machine. And there is one more person I owe, he said. Her name is... No, she's the woman I used to be married to. She taught me sentences are not houses if you never let anyone else inside. I am going to write her now at the kitchen table of another home and tell her I finally understand what she asked for. The boring bravery of showing up without an alibi. If you're me, do it before Christmas. If you're not me, do it now. We think epiphanies are thunderheads. Most are weather fronts that arrive overnight and make the morning a different species of breathable. I put the tape player down and wrote 2 letters. The first to my ex, to Charlotte, her name, a shape in my mouth I had kept safe even when I wasn't. I told her I was sorry for treating our marriage like an ongoing test of my sincerity. I told her I had learned the name of that behavior up here by the cold water, and it was selfishness with a soft coat. I did not ask for forgiveness. I asked for her to spend it on herself. The second was the letter worth keeping, the one for the map drawer. It said, "If you're me, leave the tape in the cupboard and stop trying to manage your narrative. If you're someone else, hi, I was too. You don't need to be the best version of a story to be good at a life. Fix the hinge. Eat Syrah's chowder. Do not kiss anyone to prove you could. If you must climb out on the breakwater at night, tell someone and carry a stupid flashlight. Call the caretaker by her name. It's Isa. And when you go, because we all go, leave a note that helps the next person do it with less theater. Finally, if you rename the gull, she will sue." I signed it with my full name. I put it under the maps. I stayed. Not forever. There isn't a forever that belongs to houses. I found a repair job with a man who paid cash in the way that made you think he'd be honorable if only the world understood his philosophy. I hated it and then liked it, and then realized liking work is one of the adult facts no one writes songs about. I met Nia for coffee, and we did not invent a tragedy. We talked about gutters and mothers and the sound-frozen ropes make in March. I apologized to Sarah for the week where I tried out sincerity on her like a sweater. She laughed and told me to help her stack wood instead of performing growth. I fixed 3 hinges without a speech. In December, when the day ends at 3:30 like a child who's decided to be difficult, I drove to the city and handed Charlotte the letter in a cafe where we used to argue politely. She read it and nodded and said, "I am glad for you." We didn't hug because goodbyes only need so much architecture. I drove back to the village in a snow that believed in fantasy. The house was warm because I had left the porch light on. Church hopped twice and regarded me like a taxpayer. Before the new year, a man in a rental car stopped in front of the cottage with the engine running the way people do when they plan to stay just long enough for courage to arrive. He carried 2 duffel bags and a look that said he knew the alphabet of excuses by heart. He looked like me had I not earned Issa's last tape. I watched from the window the way people watch a past they learn to leave. He stood on the porch like a person wondering whether doors appreciate politeness. He went in. The gull swore. The wind decided to be a choir. I didn't leave another tape. The drawer was already full. Instead, I went to the desk and wrote a small note and tucked it in the ledger at the back, where only nosy people go. If you are looking for a sign, boredom is the right one. Do something boring for someone else and then see if you still need a plot. J. Hale. On some winter nights, the power sulks and the house bristles, and I think I hear the player breathe. I get up and stand at the window and say my own name out loud like I'm introducing myself to a person I want to respect me later. I put the kettle on because it's warmer if you give the night a job. I listen for the sound of the breakwater testing good men, and I let it. It isn't my job to rename danger anymore. It's my job to call things by what they are: wind, hunger, apology, hinge, letter, stay, go. On the first afternoon in March, when the light permits a lie about spring, I walked to the cafe and found my seat. Nia poured coffee. "You're still here," she said, surprised and not. "Until I'm not," I said. "And when I'm not, I'll leave the light on." She nodded like she'd been awarded a small break. "Church will appreciate it," she said. "She prefers the porch when we are generous." I laughed. I have become the man who laughs at gull jokes. Good. It's a specific future I can survive. The new tenant, his name is something that will be written cleanly in the ledger, a name belonging to a man who thinks he came here for weather. We'll find my note in someone else's letter and a tape with a number that pretends to be a countdown. He'll meet a woman named Naya and fail or not fail in public. He'll try to kiss on the wrong porch. He'll write an apology bigger than it needs to be. And if the house is kind, and if church decides to sit on his railing like a judge with great affection for recidivists, and if Isa hides a tape until he earns it, he'll leave a better note than mine under the maps. If he's me, he won't be by the time he goes. That's the whole weather report. That's all the ghosting anyone's entitled to. And if he isn't me at all, if he's a stranger with a habit of turning quiet into theater, the house will do what it does. It will offer tapes and hinges and a gull who refuses to die. And the sea will keep its knives sharp for the right reasons, and the breakwater will keep its policy, and the wind will taste like the truth for a minute or two before it changes direction. I used to think starting over was a geography problem. This place taught me it was an inventory of what I keep, of what I fix, of the notes I leave where other people can find them without having to be impressed. Of the moment I stop outsourcing my courage to machines and write it on paper someone might not read, and then say it to a face that can return it with the right weather. Tonight the power is steady. The stove clicks once and then obeys. I wash the chipped mug and put it back upside down. The ledger lives with the maps. My note is in the back, unimpressive, stubborn as a family recipe. The gull complains. The wind practices its vowels. Somewhere, the new tenant pulls a drawer and finds the first tape and decides whether to press play. I hope he does. I hope he doesn't need it. I hope both. That's how you know the month mattered. Not because the coast changed you, but because you learned to leave a light on without writing an essay about it. If you made it to the end of the story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.